The HOA said they were protecting kids when they destroyed our family's creek. But we knew better. It wasn't about safety, it was about power. They thought tearing it down would silence us, that one family couldn't fight back against their board. What they didn't realize was that my family wasn't ordinary. We had the training, the connections, and the mindset to play their game and win. So when they crossed the line, we decided to show them exactly what happens when you pick the wrong family to push around. On the surface, the Cole family looked like they were living the dream. Their home sat in a quiet, well-kept neighborhood, and for years, everything seemed peaceful. But hidden behind those suburban smiles was a brewing conflict with the homeowners association, better known as the HOA. It all started with the creek that ran behind the Cole family's property. For generations, that little waterway had been part of the landscape. Kids played near it, families enjoyed the view, and the Coles themselves took pride in keeping it clean and natural. But then came whispers from the HOA board that the creek was no longer safe. The official reasoning? The HOA claimed the creek posed a danger to children. They argued that kids could slip, drown, or be injured by the uneven ground. Their solution was as extreme as it was devastating. The creek had to be drained. The Coles fought back. They argued that the creek had never harmed anyone in decades of neighborhood history. They pointed out that the area was fenced, posted with signs, and regularly maintained. But no matter how much evidence they provided, the HOA pushed harder. Then one morning, without warning, the Coles woke up to find construction crews at work. Heavy machinery tore through the backyard, pipes were laid, and the flowing water was redirected underground. By the end of the day, the creek that had been there for more than 50 years was nothing more than a muddy ditch. The family was devastated. Their children cried watching the place they loved destroyed. Neighbors stood in shock. And the worst part, the HOA bragged about it. They sent out a notice to every homeowner announcing the project had been for the safety of the community, and anyone who disagreed should remember the danger to children they had just removed. For the Coles, this was the final straw. Losing the creek wasn't just about water. It was about the arrogance of a board that thought they could do whatever they wanted. Tyler Cole, the oldest son, took the loss personally. He was in his late 20s, a quiet but determined man with a background in technology and environmental studies. Watching the destruction fueled something inside him. If the HOA wanted to play dirty, he was ready to fight back, but on his own terms. At first, the family tried legal channels. Paula Wittman, the longtime HOA president, dismissed every complaint. Meetings were shut down, letters went unanswered, and when the Coles tried to rally neighbors, Paula reminded them that the danger to children argument would stand up in any court. But Tyler wasn't convinced. He began digging deeper, pulling records of HOA meetings, construction permits, and financial documents. What he uncovered shocked him. The HOA hadn't just drained the creek for safety, they had ties to a development deal that would benefit from the land change. Tyler's anger turned into determination. He knew fighting legally would take years and cost a fortune. Instead, he came up with a plan, a way to make Paula and the HOA board feel the consequences of what they had done. Using his knowledge of hydrology and tech, Tyler devised a system that would redirect stormwater runoff straight into the manicured lawns of HOA board members. He quietly installed underground piping, disguised drains, and smart-controlled valves. Within weeks, whenever heavy rain fell, the pristine yards of Paula and her allies turned into swampy messes. Lawns flooded, gardens drowned, mosquitoes multiplied. The same board members who destroyed the Coles Creek now found themselves living in soggy, muddy yards. And while they scrambled to fix the issue, Tyler stayed quiet, acting innocent while his system kept working in the background. Neighbors began whispering that it was karma, that nature itself was striking back. Paula, furious, accused the Coles. Directly, but without evidence, she had nothing. Tyler had built everything too carefully, hidden behind layers of design that looked like natural drainage problems. But Tyler wasn't done. For him, this wasn't just revenge. It was about justice. He wanted Paula's power dismantled completely. And as he dug further into HOA records, he found even darker secrets about how far the board was willing to go to control the community. Tyler's discovery of corruption inside the HOA only deepened his determination. While Paula Whitman and her closest board members hid behind the excuse of protecting children, the paper trail told another story. Through late nights spent combing through public records, Tyler found inconsistencies in the HOA's finances. Payments had been shuffled through multiple accounts, and projects were billed at inflated costs. The so-called safety project that destroyed the creek. It had been approved with forged signatures and fake court orders. Someone on the board had clearly altered documents to make it look legal. When Tyler showed this to his parents, they were stunned. His father muttered that Paula had always been controlling, but this was on another level. His mother, trying to stay optimistic, said maybe they could bring this to the county, but Tyler knew better. These kinds of bureaucratic games could drag on for years. Paula and her allies knew how to twist rules in their favor. If the Coles wanted change, they would have to expose Paula in a way no one could deny. That's when Tyler decided to expand his revenge plan. The flooding of lawns was just the beginning. Now, he wanted the truth out in the open. He started small. Anonymous letters appeared in neighbors' mailboxes, containing snippets of financial irregularities. The notes didn't point to any one family, but hinted at serious misuse of community funds. Within weeks, residents began demanding answers at HOA meetings. Paula tried to shut them down, claiming everything was taken out of context, but the pressure was growing. Meanwhile, Tyler used his technical skills to hack into old HOA emails. What he found was explosive. Paula had been coordinating with a developer to push for zoning changes. Draining the creek wasn't about kids' safety, it was about clearing the way for future property deals. Tyler leaked these emails to a local journalist under an alias. Soon, whispers of corruption spread beyond the neighborhood. Paula was furious, calling it fake news and accusing disgruntled residents of trying to smear her reputation. But behind the scenes, she was scrambling to keep her grip on power. The turning point came when Paula tried to retaliate. Late one evening, Tyler noticed a strange car idling near their house. The driver never got out, just sat with the engine running. A week later, the Cole family received a legal notice claiming they were violating HOA rules by leaving their trash bins visible for more than 12 hours. It was laughable compared to the creek being destroyed, but Tyler recognized the tactic. Paula was trying to intimidate them, showing she could make their lives miserable. Instead of backing down, Tyler leaned in harder. He began recording HOA meetings using a small hidden microphone. The recordings caught Paula making off-the-record comments that directly contradicted official statements. In one clip, she admitted the creek project had been fast-tracked to avoid outside interference. In another, she joked that residents would forget all about it in a year. These recordings, paired with the financial documents, painted a clear picture of an HOA board more interested in profit and control than the community's well-being. But Tyler's plan wasn't just about exposing Paula. He wanted her and her allies to feel what his family had felt, the sense of helplessness when something precious was taken away. That's when he made the flooding system more aggressive. Instead of just activating during storms, he installed concealed water tanks that could release controlled amounts of water at specific times. Board members would wake up to their lawns soaked, basements damp, and gardens destroyed. The swamp effect, as Tyler quietly called it, spread slowly but surely. Neighbors who weren't on the board began to notice too. They started asking why only certain houses seemed to be suffering constant drainage problems. Some whispered about curses, others suspected shoddy construction. Paula, frustrated and unable to explain it, blamed aging infrastructure. But the irony was clear. The same woman who drained a creek over danger to children now lived in a house surrounded by standing water and mosquitoes. Through it all, Tyler stayed careful. He never bragged, never left evidence, and never directly confronted Paula. He let the pressure build, letting the HOA tear itself apart from the inside. But as weeks turned into months, Tyler discovered that what Paula had done went even deeper. The neighborhood politics. Buried in the emails was a trail that led far beyond the community. One name kept appearing, a consulting firm with ties to government contracts. It seemed absurd at first. Why would a suburban HOA president be dealing with a firm connected to high-level projects? The more Tyler dug, the more disturbing it became. The Creek project hadn't just been about development. There were environmental studies in the files, suggesting the land had traces of contaminants, possibly from old military waste dumped decades ago. By destroying the creek, the HOA had eliminated a natural waterway that could have revealed dangerous runoff. This wasn't just corruption, it was a cover-up. Tyler realized his family had stumbled into something much bigger than a petty neighborhood feud. Paula and the HOA weren't just greedy, they were protecting powerful interests. And now, by digging into the files, Tyler had made himself a target. One night, as he sifted through another set of documents, his laptop suddenly froze. Then the screen went black. A warning message appeared briefly before everything shut down. "Stop digging!" Tyler sat in the dark, the glow of the dead screen reflecting in his eyes. His revenge had started as personal payback, but now it was pulling him into a shadowy web of secrets he never expected. And Paula Wittmann? She wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president anymore. She was a gatekeeper to something far more dangerous. Tyler knew that once his computer had been hacked, the game had changed. He wasn't just messing with Paula anymore. He had attracted the attention of people who operated on a completely different level. Still, he refused to stop. If anything, the warning only convinced him that he was on the right track. He switched to a new laptop, one that never connected to his home Wi-Fi, and used public libraries and coffee shops to continue digging. Every time he uncovered another document, he made multiple copies, storing them in cloud accounts under false names. If someone tried to silence him, they would never be able to erase everything. Meanwhile, life in the neighborhood was unraveling. The flooding Tyler engineered was taking its toll. Lawns once groomed like golf courses were now soggy, brown, and littered with patches of algae. Board members found themselves pumping out their basements every few days, their frustration boiling over. At one HOA meeting, Paula snapped. She accused certain residents of sabotaging the community. Her voice cracked as she shouted that outsiders were trying to destroy everything they had built. Some neighbors clapped, but more looked uneasy. They were starting to see through her facade. Tyler sat in the back, recording the entire meltdown. Later, he uploaded the audio anonymously to an online forum where locals often discussed HOA scandals. The clip spread quickly. Soon, Paula was the subject of ridicule, not only in their community, but across nearby towns. But the ridicule didn't stop her. Instead, it made her more aggressive. She filed new restrictions against the Coles, citing nonsense rules about lawn height and driveway stains. She even sent threatening letters, claiming that continued defiance could lead to foreclosure. Tyler's parents were frightened. His father warned him that they might be forced to sell the house and leave. His mother begged him to stop, fearing Paula's reach was too long. But Tyler couldn't let go. Not when he knew the truth. The deeper he went, the more shocking the discoveries. Those environmental studies he'd uncovered pointed to toxins buried decades earlier. According to one file, in 1968, a government contractor had disposed of chemical waste on the very land where the neighborhood now stood. The creek had been slowly carrying trace amounts downstream. By destroying it, the HOA had effectively hidden the evidence. And Paula? She wasn't just covering it up out of greed. Her brother-in-law had once worked for the same contractor. If the contamination came to light, it could ruin her family and drag powerful names into lawsuits. For Tyler, the picture was clear. Paula wasn't protecting children. She was protecting herself and those connected to her, but exposing that truth wasn't going to be easy. One night, as Tyler sifted through more files, he noticed movement outside his window. At first, He thought it was just a neighbor walking, a dog. But then he saw a shadow pause, too long, near the edge of the Coles yard. Whoever it was, they were watching the house. Tyler froze, then quickly shut down his computer and pulled the blinds. The next morning, muddy footprints trailed across the sidewalk near their mailbox. It was a reminder. Paula, or whoever was behind her, wasn't going to sit quietly while he kept digging. Still, Tyler pressed forward. He started reaching out to activists, environmental lawyers, and investigative journalists. He never gave them his real name, but he sent them pieces of the files and recordings. Slowly, a network of people began to pay attention. At the same time, he expanded his neighborhood campaign. The flooding system became more unpredictable. Water seemed to strike at random, sometimes soaking Paula's yard for days, sometimes hitting her allies on the board. Residents who once supported her started questioning if the leadership was cursed. Rumors spread like wildfire. Paula called emergency meetings, insisting the problems were due to faulty drainage pipes, but Tyler made sure evidence of her lies leaked out each time. He hacked into the HOA's own announcement system, slipping in anonymous warnings that the board was hiding dangers from the community. Residents began showing up angry, demanding resignations. One evening, after yet another shouting match at a board meeting, Paula stormed out, her face red with fury. Tyler's recording of her screaming, "You people have no idea what you're dealing with," spread online within hours. The walls were closing in on her. But just when it looked like Paula might finally crack under pressure, the story took a darker turn. A reporter who had contacted Tyler under the alias Michael suddenly went silent. Her last message mentioned that she was being followed. Days later, her car was found abandoned near a highway rest stop. No one saw her again. Tyler was shaken. He realized this wasn't just about embarrassing Paula anymore. Someone was willing to make people disappear to keep the contamination secret. His parents noticed his growing anxiety. His father pulled him aside one night and said, "Son, this is bigger than you. If you keep pushing, they'll come after you too." But Tyler couldn't stop. He felt a responsibility now. The Coles had lost their creek, their peace, and nearly their home. But other families were at risk too. Children played on that land every day, never knowing what they were stepping on. He doubled down. Instead of slow leaks of information, he prepared a massive data dump. Every file, every email, every recording, he compiled it into a package ready to send to multiple outlets at once. If something happened to him, the truth would still get out. And that's when he made his biggest move yet. He redirected the flooding. System one final time, creating a surge that struck only the homes of Paula and her closest allies. The water rose higher than ever, pooling into a swamp-like mess that no amount of pumps could fix. Paula's home, once the symbol of her authority, became a damp, rotting shell. Neighbors were horrified. Many believed it was divine punishment, others whispered about sabotage. But almost everyone agreed. Paula had lost control. As she stood outside her house one morning, ankle-deep in water, cameras from local news stations captured the scene. The footage spread fast. Paula, the self-proclaimed protector of children, was now presiding over a neighborhood in chaos, her leadership in ruins. Tyler watched from his window, satisfied but cautious. He knew this wasn't over. Paula was desperate, and desperate people were dangerous. But for the first time, the community was turning against her. And somewhere in the shadows, the bigger players, the ones with ties to the contamination, were watching too. The neighborhood was at a breaking point. Years of Paula's control and secrecy had finally boiled over, and now the cracks were impossible to hide. The once pristine community had become a swamp, and her promises of safety rang hollow. At the next HOA meeting, the room was filled to capacity. Residents, angry and exhausted, demanded answers. Paula tried to calm them, waving papers and insisting that outside forces were responsible for the mess. But her voice shook, and her arguments no longer held weight. People wanted proof, not excuses. Tyler sat quietly in the back, listening. He could feel the tide shifting. For the first time, neighbors questioned everything Paula had ever said. A woman stood up and asked why the creek was destroyed in the first place. Another man shouted about the cost of constant flooding repairs. The room turned into chaos. Paula tried to gavel the meeting into order, but the sound was drowned out by angry voices. Tyler recorded it all. Later that night, he uploaded the footage anonymously, and within hours it spread across social media. Paula's outbursts, her defensive rambling, and the angry crowd became a local sensation. Comment sections filled with calls for her resignation. Still, Paula didn't step down. Instead, she doubled down. She hired private security to patrol her property, locked her gates, and limited her public appearances. To her, this wasn't about a neighborhood anymore. It was survival. Meanwhile, Tyler finalized his plan. The data dump he'd been preparing was ready. Thousands of pages of documents, secret memos, environmental reports, and recordings were stored in multiple accounts. He set up a timed release so that even if something happened to him, the information would go public. But before he pulled the trigger, something unexpected happened. An older man, one of Paula's longtime allies on the board, showed up at the Coles house late one evening. His name was Richard, a retired engineer who had always defended Paula in meetings. But that night, his tone was different. "I know what you're doing," he told Tyler quietly. "And I know you're not wrong." Tyler froze. He had prepared himself for threats, not admissions. Richard explained that years ago, he had signed off on development plans that ignored contamination warnings. He hadn't understood the full scope at the time, but Paula had. And instead of stopping construction, she buried the warnings. She convinced others on the board to look away, promising that the issue would never surface. But it's surfacing now, Richard admitted. His hands trembled as he spoke. "And if it comes out, all of us who signed those papers are finished." Tyler asked him why he was telling him this. Richard's answer was simple. Guilt. He couldn't live with the secret anymore. He handed Tyler a folder. Inside were original copies of signed approvals, minutes from secret board meetings, and letters exchanged between Paula and government contacts. These documents connected everything: Paula, the board, and the companies that dumped the chemicals decades ago. It was the smoking gun Tyler needed. The next day, Paula made her boldest move yet. She called a private meeting with select board members and demanded they grant her emergency powers to restore order. But news of her plan leaked. By the time the meeting began, dozens of residents had gathered outside, chanting for her resignation. Tyler blended into the crowd, his phone ready to stream. Inside, Paula argued that drastic measures were necessary. She spoke of danger to children, the very phrase she had used to justify destroying the creek. But this time, the words fell flat. Parents shouted back that their kids were the ones wading through flooded yards, breathing mold from damp houses. Paula had no answer. Then, in a moment Tyler would never forget, Richard stood up. His voice, usually quiet and loyal, carried through the room. "She's lying to all of you. She's been lying for years." Gasps filled the hall. Paula's face turned pale. She tried to interrupt, but Richard raised the folder he'd given Tyler. He announced that the evidence of contamination and cover-up existed, and that he had shared it with others who were ready to make it public. The crowd erupted. Some shouted in anger, others in disbelief. Paula's allies looked stunned, unsure whether to defend her or protect themselves. Tyler streamed every second. Within minutes, the footage was online, spreading faster than any of Paula's attempts to control the story. Local reporters swarmed the neighborhood. The scandal was out. Paula tried to fight back. She denied everything, accused Richard of betrayal, and even suggested that Tyler and his family were behind the entire mess. But the weight of the documents was too heavy to ignore. Copies appeared in journalists' hands, on blogs, and even on environmental watchdog websites. The HOA was in collapse. Board members resigned one by one, leaving Paula isolated. Residents filed complaints with state authorities. Lawsuits loomed on the horizon. But Paula wasn't finished. In the days that followed, she disappeared from public view. Her house sat dark, curtains drawn, while rumors swirled. Some claimed she had fled town. Others whispered about federal investigators questioning her. Tyler, though, wasn't celebrating. He knew the story wasn't over. The contamination scandal involved more than just Paula. Powerful people had stakes in keeping the truth buried, and while Paula might fall, others might rise to protect themselves. One night, as Tyler prepared another batch of documents for release, he received an anonymous email. The subject line read, "You've done enough." The message contained no threats, no names, just a warning. But it chilled him more than any angry letter or Paula's shouting ever had. He realized that the battle was far from won. Still, for the first time, the community saw Paula for what she truly was, the protector of children? No. She was the one who had endangered them all along, and Tyler, the teenager who had started this war with a hidden water system, was no longer just a prankster fighting the HOA. He was the one holding the truth, that could topple more than just a neighborhood board. The swamp he had created wasn't just in their yards anymore. It had seeped into politics, business, and power. And there was no draining it now. In the weeks that followed the explosive meeting, the neighborhood shifted from anger to shock. News vans parked at the entrances. Reporters shoved microphones at residents, and the once quiet streets became a stage for a scandal far bigger than a homeowners association dispute. The story ran on local stations first, then spread to national outlets. Headlines screamed about HOA corruption, environmental cover-ups, and a decades-long danger to children. Paula's name was everywhere, and her face, once the picture of authority, was replayed over and over on screens, her denial forever frozen, in disbelief. State investigators arrived within days. They interviewed residents, subpoenaed records, and demanded access to old development files. For the first time, the secrets Paula had worked so hard to bury were now in the hands of people she couldn't control. Tyler watched it all unfold with a mix of pride and unease. He had wanted the truth out, but seeing strangers sift through his neighborhood felt surreal. His family kept their distance, careful not to appear as though they were fueling the fire. But inside their home, they knew the storm was just beginning. Paula, meanwhile, went silent. For nearly 2 weeks, no one saw her. Some speculated she had left the state, while others whispered she was negotiating behind closed doors. When she finally appeared, it wasn't at a meeting or on television. It was in a courthouse, escorted by lawyers. She stood before a judge to face the first of what would become many hearings. Residents packed the gallery, eager to see her held, accountable. Paula, once commanding and sharp-tongued, looked smaller somehow. Her confidence had been replaced with something colder: calculation. Her defense was simple. She claimed she had acted to protect children, following her best judgment. Based on the information available at the time, she painted herself as a scapegoat, insisting others had signed off on the same documents. She even tried to point to Richard, accusing him of rewriting history to save himself. But the evidence was too clear. The letters, the signed approvals, the hidden warnings, they all pointed back to Paula's deliberate choices. As the hearings dragged on, residents came forward with testimony. Parents described flooded basements, kids with recurring respiratory problems, and years of unexplained illnesses. Their stories gave weight to the documents, putting human faces to the damage. Tyler attended one of the sessions quietly, sitting in the back row. Listening to neighbors speak, he felt the weight of what he had uncovered. It wasn't just about a power-hungry HOA president. It was about lives altered by greed and cover-ups. But there was another layer still hidden. Tyler's timed data release had been set in motion weeks earlier. Every few days, New batches of documents appeared online, drawing more attention to the case. Among them were communications that hinted at connections beyond Paula. Contacts in state agencies, quiet exchanges with contractors, even coded notes suggesting higher-level involvement. Journalists seized on these details. The story was no longer just about one HOA gone rogue. It became a question of how deep the contamination scandal ran, and who else had looked the other way. For Paula, the walls closed in quickly. Board members who once stood by her turned on her, claiming they had been misled. Longtime friends avoided her in public. Even her private security team eventually disappeared. She was left alone in the very house she had fortified against her neighbors. Then came the most shocking turn. Investigators announced that Paula was being charged not only with falsifying documents and negligence, but also with obstruction of justice. They alleged that she had knowingly destroyed records and attempted to intimidate witnesses during the investigation. The news hit the neighborhood like a thunderclap. For many, it was the moment they had been waiting for, proof that Paula would, finally, face consequences. But Tyler felt no joy. He saw Paula not just as a corrupt leader, but as a symbol of something bigger. The way power can be abused. The way truth can be buried until someone dares to dig it up. In private, his parents urged him to step back. They feared for his safety, especially after the anonymous warning email. But Tyler couldn't. He had come too far. Instead, he made one final move. He compiled all his findings, the documents, the footage, the testimonies, and sent them to a national investigative program. A month later, the story aired on prime-time television. Millions watched as the scandal was laid out in painstaking detail, from the destruction of the creek to the lies about danger to children. The impact was immediate. State officials announced sweeping reforms, promising stricter oversight of HOAs and tougher penalties for environmental cover-ups. Paula's name became a cautionary tale, cited in debates and town hall meetings far beyond their community. Back in the neighborhood, life slowly began to change. The swampy yards dried as new drainage systems were installed. The air felt lighter, not just because of the repairs, but because the shadow of Paula's control was gone. At the final meeting of what was left of the HOA, residents voted to dissolve the board entirely. No more secret memos, no more power plays, just neighbors deciding together how to care for their community. Tyler didn't attend that meeting. He sat by the rebuilt creek instead, watching the water flow again. For him, the fight had been more than about one person. It had been about standing up when no one else would, about refusing to accept lies disguised as protection. Paula, meanwhile, faded into obscurity. Facing trial after trial, her wealth drained by legal battles, she became a ghost of the figure she once was. The woman who had claimed to be a guardian of children would forever be remembered as the one who endangered them. And Tyler, he didn't see himself as a hero. He was just a teenager who had refused to back down. But for his neighbors, he was the one who had turned the tide, the one who had pulled the truth from the depths and forced it into the light. In the end, the swamp wasn't just in the ground. It had been in the lies, the cover-ups, the unchecked power. And by exposing it, Tyler had done what no HOA president ever could. He had given his community back its voice. The creek flowed again, children played near its banks, and for the first time in years the neighborhood felt alive. The danger had passed, not because of Paula, but in spite of her.